Hello, I'm Pete Rawdon from Veeam Software Alliances team, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this discussion on best practices for modern cloud data protection. We've got a first-class panel of industry experts to explore the data protection challenges in the hybrid cloud world, how we can help customers create value, and also help successfully deliver transformations. So let's meet the panel. Could I ask each of you to briefly introduce yourself? Let's start with Phil.
Hey, certainly, Pete, and good day to everyone. I'm Phil Goodwin. I'm with IDC, an analyst research firm. I'm responsible for the infrastructure software platform research that we have at IDC. And my particular area of expertise is multi-cloud data management and protection. It's great to be here, Pete.
Brilliant, welcome. And Jeff?
Sure, thanks very much, Pete. My name is Jeff Reichard. I work in the office of the CTO at Veeam, and that means I spend a lot of my time speaking with analysts like Phil, but also a lot of time talking with customers about what their data management and data protection requirements are.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And Giovanni?
Hi, Pete. Good day to everyone. First of all, let me thank Veeam for giving me the opportunity to be here today. And I come from Accenture, and I'm part of the Accenture Cloud Innovation Center Rome, a place that we have created to collaborate with customer, with technology partner, with startup to create innovative solution leveraging on cloud technology. We'll talk about this later in this today. So thanks a lot.
You're very welcome, and that's awesome. Thanks for all of you to all of you for investing your time today. Before we start, I just want to mention that the audience interaction is important to us. So please take the opportunity to post observations or ask questions in the chat facility, and we'll answer those as we go through the discussion. Right, let's get started. We hear a lot about cloud first, the cloud first message that's driving the hybrid cloud market. Phil, what can you tell us about the prevalence of the hybrid cloud environments?
Sure, Pete. I can start by giving you some IDC research with regards to the specifics around hybrid cloud. And I can tell you that at this point, really, hybrid cloud has become ubiquitous. And a lot of that, the tip of the spear, quite honestly, is data protection. About 90% of organizations, according to our research, use cloud for at least part of their data protection. That doesn't mean they use it for everything, but they may use it as a repository for backup sets, for data survival in the event of a disaster, for data protection with regards to ransomware and so forth. And in fact, we predict that by 2025, 55% of organizations are going to have a cloud-centric approach to their data protection and their data management. A lot of that will be multi-cloud related, and multi-cloud means multiple public clouds in addition to private cloud, because that's really what drives the application deployment. We find organizations need to deploy applications on different clouds for different reasons, and it simply is an outgrowth of that application deployment. One of the problems that has come up with hybrid cloud and with multi-cloud is the notion of data silos or data sprawl. And what I mean by data sprawl is we now have data spread across the core, the cloud, the edge. We have it in SaaS applications, we have it in on-premise applications, and we have it in all kinds of different forms. And that creates problems in terms of tools, in terms of redundancy, labor, and a lot of other issues that come up with that. One of the problems that is making that even worse, as I said, is the application deployment. And we believe that as many applications are being deployed now between 2020 and 2025 as have been deployed in the previous 40 years. A lot of that is driven by cloud native applications, by edge applications, microservices based on containers and so forth. So this whole issue, Pete, is a real serious problem and one that is a serious problem for IT organizations to deal with.
Wow, okay, thank you for that. Jeff, do you have a perspective?
Absolutely. So these results around hybrid cloud adoption definitely match what Veeam is hearing from our customers and what we're finding in Veeam research. The physical data center is not going away, but applications are increasingly either moving to the cloud or, as Phil just pointed out, being born in the cloud. One of the interesting points about the IDC research that we just heard about, when you think about 55% of data protection being focused in the cloud in just a couple of years, it might help to ask yourself, why are we in that situation? Where are we? What challenges are customers running into that are causing them to fundamentally rethink how they protect their data and where they locate both the data and the services that are doing that data protection? At Veeam, we do research every year. We actually conducted earlier this year the biggest survey of data protection trends that's ever been done by anyone. We use that to drive product direction and get a broader view of what our customers are going through. And something that's consistent year after year matches what we heard in this year's research. When we asked customers if there was a gap between how quickly they could get back up and running, and that is specifically when we asked the people who are running backups and who are running the tech shop, if there was a gap between how quickly they could get back up and running and how quickly the business needed them to get back up and running, 80% either strongly agreed or agreed that they could not get back up and running with their current tools as fast as the business needed them to. And 76% either strongly agreed or agreed that after an outage, they would lose more data than the business would like them to. And this was true across geographies. It was true across public and private sector and all different kinds of industry verticals. So there's definitely an unmet need. And I think Phil's research and IDC's research shows that cloud is going to step in to fill a lot of that gap.
Okay, that's really, really cool. Giovanni?
Yes, Peter. Let me say, I'm very happy to hear this info from Phil and Jeff because are very aligned with what we know in Accenture. Let me say, I don't want to talk about data protection only, but I would like to say how cloud is important and is what we see in Accenture. In an era of compressed transformation, cloud is the single most powerful tool organization have to manage, have to master change. From emerging technology, cloud computing is emerging as a mainstream trend. To confirm this, I can refer to several researchers, but we have IDC, we have Phil here, can be better from me than me. But I think I would like to use only one data from our technology vision research. And 90% of large companies that have embraced this new model, albeit with different forms and approach. And I'm happy to see that we are aligned with the field data. And we can confirm with this with our day-by-day experience that many companies have started their cloud journey. Let me say we have never seen such a rapid shift in enterprise technology. Cloud is the #1 technology being scaled in this year. 45% of executives report their organization is scaled up cloud technology in different response to COVID-19. It's why we declared now in our technology vision that cloud is now the core of the company, not just the periphery. Technology is no longer just a vehicle for success. It's the vehicle all possible success depends on. And we have other point aligned. I'm happy to say that we have other point aligned with IDC research. For example, we know that we believe that most companies are about 20–30% in cloud today, but they are moving to the 80% to remain competitive. The sudden rush is because companies realize they must be on the cloud at scale to achieve the cost efficiency, business resiliency, new experiences, and operation needed to run successfully to decades to come.
Okay, so a really critical development and change for customers that they're experiencing. And this trend is, I think, is leading to data being kept in different places and creating maybe data silos or the challenge of having data in lots of different places. Phil, what's your findings in terms of hybrid cloud from a data placement perspective?
Yeah, Pete, I'll give you some other data points. Our research shows that about 50% of data is currently kept at the core, about 22% in the cloud, about 19% at the edge, and about 9% in other, wherever other might happen to be. What's happening though is that is really shifting, because that 50% is down substantially from previous years. So the preponderance of data is growing faster at the cloud, or in the cloud and at the edge, than it is at the core. It's still growing at the core, it just happens to be growing faster in those other locations. So gradually what we're finding is that that balance of power is kind of shifting from the core, which has traditionally been the on-premise data center as well as private cloud, and into the public cloud and into the edge. And that's really what's driving that transformation that Jeff and I mentioned in the opening discussion about organizations shifting towards a cloud-centric model in their data protection and their data management.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, this ties in exactly with what we're hearing. To carry on to the different locations where data is being kept, both in the physical data center and at the edge and in the cloud. In that same survey that I mentioned before, we asked customers, and we asked a lot of questions, but we asked and we gave them a lot of choices. What would a modern data protection solution look like to you? And I'll just pull out a few of the points that got big votes in that particular survey question. We heard 36% say that cross-cloud backup capability was a key capability for their backup solution. So the ability to send data from AWS to Azure or Azure to GCP or wherever it may be. We also heard 34% say that mobility between on-prem and cloud was critical, either backing up on premises and migrating that data to the cloud or vice versa. And I've actually talked to customers whose whole cloud migration project depended on management seeing the ability to back that data back up on-prem if they did do the migration. And then 32%, again, tying exactly to what Phil said about complexity and how the data is sprawling out now, 32% said a modern data protection solution has to be able to manage both cloud and on-prem workloads in a single tool so that we don't have separate silos of data protection with all the data silos that are growing around us too.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And Giovanni, your perspective?
Yeah, Peter, I agree with Jeff. And let me say that these are the typical challenges we have to address every time we talk about cloud with our customer. And it's clear that these messages are even more critical with the explosion of hybrid and multi-cloud scenarios. We have already said that most client infrastructure footprint will land in public cloud, but there will still be need for private cloud or on-premise infrastructure to fulfill a unique business requirement, as public is not fitted for all workload. The number that we have, for example, is that 74% of enterprise report running in every cloud environment. The reason could be different. Technical limitation, systems that cannot be virtualized, edge computing latency, and so on. Low requirement and so on. The world of cloud is getting increasingly complex, with boundaries blurring between public and private cloud providers. So companies need a holistic strategy to manage the new cloud continuum across private and public cloud, on-premise infrastructure, and edge computing. And in this complex scenario, it's clear that we have different issues related to the data management. So I agree, is the reason why I agree with the data that Jeff showed before. I'm thinking to data protection requirement due to public cloud use or requirement from law, as I said before, different approach, but not only. The data management tool has to enable other type of services, because we need a solution that can enable to move data and my application in different data center or region. Talking about the typical hybrid cloud scenarios, enable me to have disaster, to be agile in disaster recovery, business continuity scenarios. And let me say something that then we show after later during our presentation is part of the activity that we are done. We have analyzed with Veeam. And the last things, we have to be ready to manage a new technology that is the Kubernetes, and typical like Kubernetes, everything is cloud native. It's not easy, and let me say this is why, despite company awareness about convenience and opportunity tied to the cloud adoption, many initiatives struggle to take off. Let me say, a note is the reason why in late 2020, Accenture launched the cloud first, a full stack of cloud services, but a strategy as well to help customers across every industry become cloud first businesses, so they can accelerate the digital transformation, innovate faster, and create differentiated sustainable value.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing different research and surveys from IDC, from Veeam, from Accenture, but significant alignment in what we're finding in terms of the challenges, the way the market's moving on hybrid cloud, and the challenges the customers are facing. So that's encouraging. Let's move on and look at difficulties that customers may experience when they manage policies or data in different locations. Phil, are you hearing anything from customers in terms of the typical types of issues they experience with that?
You know, one of the number one things I hear about, Pete, from clients is the issue of complexity and looking for solutions that can simplify that particular environment. When you think about data sprawl moving across the core, the cloud, the edge, and things like that, and organizations needing to or being forced to deploy multiple tools, multiple processes, and so forth to address them, what they really want to do is bring that together, manage it as a single unit so that they can have simplified policies that are spread across the organization. And the bottom line here really is to give a consistent experience across all of those different repositories with respect to their data management and their data protection, so that they're not having to have entirely different processes for applications that may be legacy at the core. They may be cloud native applications, they may be at the edge, or certainly some mix in hybrid environment, which is the common way. But it is that common customer experience that simplifies the operations that seems to be what organizations are really looking at, number one, in terms of the solutions that they're deploying.
Okay. Jeff, what's Veeam seeing around this particular challenge?
We're definitely all singing off the same sheet of music here. We ask in our data protection trends report, again, one question that comes up year after year, because we're in the software backup business, we ask, what would it take to 2,800 IT decision makers worldwide last year to make you change the backup product? What are the capabilities that you're looking for that might make you actually change the data management solution that you've got in place right now? And we offer a lot of different specific answers to that. The answers range from things like to improve reliability, to improve the total cost of ownership of my solution, to use the same tools for cloud and on-prem. But if you boil it down into categories, what we've seen in previous years held true in this year's study, and that is folks are looking for data management that helps them manage their cost better, that helps with additional capabilities that they didn't have before, and that reduces the complexity of the environment. One thing that we can add sort of a fourth C to those three Cs this year, and it ties in exactly with Accenture's research that Giovanni mentioned, that 90% of customers have very, very significant cloud deployments, is that folks need their data protection solution to manage the cloud as well. So those four Cs, cost, capability, complexity, and cloud, are really the reason that people look to change what they're doing currently around backup.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, get that. Giovanni, your take?
Yeah, I can say very few words about this because Jeff Phil said all the most important things. I can say that we have in several projects, one of the customers' question is where my data are. Additional complexity is added since most leading cloud service provider have their infrastructure located outside customer region. And in this case, requirement from raw regulation have a great impact in this context. In other case, are the cloud provider to ask to the customer to use third-party tool to increase data protection, movie data in other location, in typical on-premises. And let me say, is thinking to this need that in ASIC, we have worked to develop a particular solution leveraging of Veeam technology to protect the cloud-based workload.
Okay, cool. I think cloud-based workloads also include SaaS workloads. What are the key considerations for data for SaaS-based workloads, Phil?
I think SaaS workloads are often one of those nasty little surprises for IT, because SaaS is often contracted for by the business unit, and I'm certainly not quarreling with that. But the business unit people are generally not savvy to the needs of data management, data protection, data governance, data security, and all the other things that go into it. So what happens is it's a little bit like the old shadow IT problem that we saw years ago being relived, where these applications get deployed and then the IT organization finds out about them and learns that the data management default SLAs supplied by the SaaS provider simply don't support the organization's overall data requirements. So for example, most SaaS applications have what I would call minimal backup requirements, maybe once a day, maybe for 30 days at best. And then after that, it's no longer retained. Their SLAs may range from days to weeks in order to actually restore data. So what we're finding is organizations, in fact, this is one of the common calls that I get from IT organizations, is we have SaaS application XYZ, how do we back it up on premise? How do we support that data? How do we keep that data to make sure that it's governed, retained, and protected the way that our organization requires it to be? So SaaS is definitely one of those things that's a major issue, and one that IT organizations need to get their hands around.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, how does this relate to data protection?
Well, what Phil just described about sometimes when you move to software as a service, all of the discipline, all of the organizational maturity around data protection and retention and regulatory mandates that you've got to be responsive to don't necessarily make that transition at the same time. We saw that a lot with COVID last year when folks had to have a solution in place right now, and maybe they got it in place right now, but they didn't get it 100% right. I'll just cite one example. Microsoft 365, wildly popular, fantastic solution. I did a seminar with 3 city CIOs back in May. All of them had gone all in on Microsoft 365 for productivity, for sharing, for things like board of supervisors meetings with constituents run on Teams, all of that. They were delighted with it. And they all backed up back on-prem because they had to be responsive to freedom of information requests for inquiries from citizens in their geography, and that was the requirements. And in one case, it was 99-year retention mandate, and you don't get that from a recycle bin. You know, no knock at all on Microsoft 365. We do presentations with Microsoft all the time around that, but it's just the fact that sometimes your retention mandates are going to mean that you need to keep things longer. Customers are actually realizing this. One more data point from data protection trends. From 2020 to 2021, when we asked customers how they were backing up Microsoft 365, the percentage of folks who were using a third-party backup solution went up almost 20%. And the rest of them realized, and we had a corresponding number move over to realizing, hey, we don't have a protection solution in place, but we're looking for one in the future. And obviously, this is no knock on Microsoft 365. It's the same as Phil said with every software as a service solution. It's actually one of the reasons that Veeam just announced that we'll be offering backup for Salesforce, which is a $285 billion company that many organizations, private and public sector, rely on, but they know they need to be able to protect that data. So it's very important to be disciplined about how you do that.
Yeah, well done on getting the latest announcement on Salesforce into the conversation. That was breaking news this week, so that's really cool. I get the flexibility that multi-cloud offers in terms of being able to place your data in different locations and and the flexibility associated with that. But there's got to be an opportunity to enhance DR, disaster recovery, DR as well. Is that something that you see, Phil?
Yeah, DR is actually one of the fastest growing segments of data protection. I can tell you about 5 to 7 years ago, only about 40% of organizations had a DR plan. That's now up closer to somewhere between 75 and 80%. And yet only 9% of organizations describe themselves as being fully mature for data for disaster recovery. Disaster recovery as a service is a market that's growing at about 18% per year, so compound annual growth rate. So it's growing really, really fast. But organizations that have been around for any period of time have the challenge of DR from multiple perspectives. So they may have legacy applications that simply aren't candidates for DR as a service, or maybe it's for a security reason that they can't do that. So we still have needs for on-premise to on-premise flexibility in disaster recovery, plus DR as a service for virtual applications, which cover about 85% of the application estate. We also have physical workloads. And I think Giovanni was talking earlier about that need for flexibility. And that's what organizations are looking for, is an orchestration capability that can restore those applications to wherever it is necessary. Because, you know, the need for disaster recovery isn't just natural disasters. Increasingly, it's around ransomware and other malware. So the flexibility to be able to recover from different points to different locations and do that with granularity is what IT organizations are seeking today for their DR solutions, Pete.
Yeah, good. Okay, Phil, not Phil, Jeff, do you have a comment on this topic too?
Yeah, Phil's research and IDC's research has shown for years, and this is what Phil led with, that the backup use case, just getting the data to the cloud, was the tip of the spear. And obviously now, as customers get more comfortable with that, we're seeing it go from just simply putting our data up in the cloud to actually fully taking advantage of the cloud. Yeah, this is another data protection trends point. This is actually from our cloud protection trends survey. It's the most recent survey that Veeam did. We surveyed folks worldwide and asked them, if you've got data and services up in the public cloud, could you please tell us what you're doing to protect that, who's responsible for protecting that, who defines the policies, things like that. What I'd like you to take a look at here is that even though folks may and probably will continue protecting data on premises and will be leaving applications on premises the way that we've discussed for some time to come, already in this survey, we have 80% of respondents that are using cloud-based services for some aspect of their backup and their disaster recovery. As Phil mentioned, obviously the early adopter here, the one that led, was just getting data up in the cloud, and that's the 40% number here. But if you look, we're configured to use cloud-hosted infrastructure as a secondary site. In other words, we're handling DR ourselves, but 39% said that we can fail over at least some of our applications to cloud-hosted infrastructure. And 27% use a purpose-built disaster recovery as a service solution, taking advantage of helpers and services like Giovanni's Accenture services can offer to actually get disaster recovery up and running. Data point about that, Veeam has 4,500 service providers that provide disaster recovery as a service in EMEA alone. So in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, just that one geo. So it's clearly a service that customers see a lot of value in and that organizations are taking big advantage of. And like Phil, I think that number is only going to go up as time goes on.
Okay, and Giovanni?
Yes, Peter. I agree with everything Phil and Jeff said, and I have already said, and Phil said before, how I have said that the cloud, one of the most important point we use the cloud is the agility. And let me say, I can say that in our center we have several solutions that we have developed to support our customer, not only when the things go well, but even to manage disaster recovery or business continuity scenarios is really important. And disaster recovery as a service is one of the typical scenarios that we implement in our center. But why this? Because it's important for us to enable customer to be agile, but leverage on cloud, for example, to keep to avoid high cost, to manage the disaster recovery and business case scenarios in a better way. And let me say, in this context, company requires for a solution able to support them in managing their disaster recovery business continuity services without losing the benefit rising from the adoption of an hybrid and hybrid public cloud approach. But not only in this case. We need to remember that we can have legacy application that cannot be virtualized, cannot be moved on cloud. In this case, it's important to have a solution that can be used on premise and enabling customer to manage this particular event in the better way. Is the reason why with the Veeam we have used one of the new technology that we have Veeam as on the market to enable customer to manage in the better way the disaster recovery in using VMware infrastructure, but let me say, thinking to the cloud approach.
Cool. I'm really excited about finding out a little bit more about this initiative. Could you tell me a bit more about the solution that you've been building at your Cloud Innovation Center with Veeam?
Yes, thanks for the question. First of all, I would like to explain why we are talking about ASIC and why it's important from the cloud perspective. First of all, we are an innovation hub for cloud technology. As part of the Cloud First, our main target is to show how putting together the system integration role and technology, we can solve typical customer challenges, but not only. We want to use our experience to support customers to think to the new, to access to technology they haven't seen before and imagine new business opportunity. For this reason, as you can see in the slide, we say that we are powered by real business, real business use case. We are not thinking only to technology, but we are thinking how to solve the customer challenges. And it's the reason why everything we do in ASIC is custom tailored. I don't want to take all the time of the meeting, but I can try to summarize why ASIC Roam is important. First of all, reduce the distance between customer and technology partner and have all these important role around the table and discuss together about cloud priority. Second, transform the client business challenges in real use cases. Once the customer challenges and priorities are clear, we work with the technology partner like Veeam to define use cases and to plan the prototype implementation. And last things, provide the agility. Prototype that we created are available for all the customer, and we can say that we have a list of solutions supporting customer to identify the right solution, not through typical slide, but touching with them the solution. And another important things, the customer can leverage on our factory to replicate our experience in their context. Then let me say, it's clear that Veeam is one of the most important partners that we have in ASIC to co-create, and we have co-created together 2 different prototypes. I can start talking about, we have talked about disaster recovery, and the first solution that I would like to analyze is the disaster recovery as a service solution that we have deployed with Veeam, but not focusing on the technology, but thinking to another important things when we need to manage disaster recovery, how to manage the disaster recovery event, the typical things that we call the disaster recovery plan. Then with Veeam, we have defined a solution to support customers to manage the disaster recovery in an easy way. Why is important? As if you remember, I've said that we start from customer needs. And let me say, when we talk about disaster recovery, the typical issue that we have to address are pages and pages of document to define the step required to regain access to a functionality to infrastructure after an event, like a natural disaster or business disruption, because we need to remember that a disaster could be related to an infrastructure fault, but an application fault as well. Complexity to share document to all the owners in a company. Complexity to maintain and update this document. Well, in ASIC, we leveraged on Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator to enable customers to define and organize the typical disaster recovery management process through a centralized tool. And most important things, in a digital way, avoiding paper, avoiding mail. No, is everything managed centrally. And we have used DRO defining a sequential flow of action and approval phase, integrating automation capability to reduce the human activity and recover time. Why is important this particular scenario? Several reasons. I already say, disaster recovery plan managed in a digital way. The automation capability that, let me say, enable us to manage quickly every phase of disaster, but not only. Enable who doesn't have a specific skill to participate to disaster recovery management, And let me say the last thing, simplify the disaster recovery plan update, because every time we have a new application or we have a new infrastructure and so on, typically we need to define a new document. With our solution, we can show how we can only manage in a digital way our plan, add a new phase to our disaster recovery plan, and we can share to all stakeholders and all the owner in an easy way.
Giovanni, thanks for sharing that. It's one thing to talk about research and trends, but it's another to hear about Veeam and our partner Accenture working together to address those challenges and deliver solutions to the markets. That's really cool. Jeff, do you have anything to add in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone that's been doing this for a while has seen disaster recovery exercises and disaster recovery plans that are one big effort and then they falter and your applications change, and the next time that you go through the exercise for the auditors or your internal requirements or whatever it may be, things don't work out so well. So obviously Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, the solution that Accenture's solution in the ASIC in Rome is built on, that Giovanni's been telling us about, is a big part of that. But the expertise of Accenture to make this process easy and to help customers get through it is also really, really critical. I will mention it is a Veeam, this particular technology solution, Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, is VMware focused, but that does extend increasingly to VMware implementations up in clouds as well. The capabilities differ depending on which VMware cloud you're talking about, but that's something increasingly that we're seeing customers opt for too. So it's a very exciting solution that Accenture has built with Veeam technology.
Cool. And we spoke about protecting SaaS-based data and silos earlier on. Is this something that seems to capture and to combine those requirements for large disparate customers? Phil?
Yeah, what we've been seeing in the marketplace, Pete, is as I mentioned in my opening remarks, an average or kind of, if you look at the distribution of numbers of silos deployed, the peak of that distribution is between 14 and 20 different silos. Those silos are caused by location, by data owner, by data type, by data policy, and there are just many different factors that go into it. So as you're saying, Pete, and as well as Giovanni and Jeff, it is those silos that are driving people to look for solutions which are emerging as data management platforms. And those data management platforms are driven by policy engines, because it's the policy engine that determines how that data is managed, how it's moved, how it's captured, how it's protected, how it's recovered, how it's archived, and how it's deleted. So it's really that whole life cycle of the data that is being driven by these data management platforms.
And Jeff, could you add Veeam's perspective?
Yeah, so the what customers want is to get help with this kind of solution. And what we recommend to customers all the time is to look at getting a trusted partner to break these silos down, to reduce this complexity, to make it work. As I said just a second ago around the whole disaster recovery question, we've all seen initiatives like this that work well once, but then as applications change, as you modernize, they don't work so well. And we're all aware too, the risks now are much greater than they have been in the past. We're all much more dependent on data than we used to be in any type of organization. And we're dealing with risks from ransomware, we're dealing with risks from natural disasters increasingly. I mean, we saw the floods in Europe and all sorts of floods and fires here in North America this past summer. So there's all kinds of issues right now that are making business continuity really critical, no matter where we're homing those applications, whether they're in the cloud or whether they're on-prem. And I'm just excited that Accenture has taken the time and their industry-leading expertise around this, solving this kind of business problem for customers, and used Veeam as the tool set to put that kind of solution in place. It's really exciting to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about movement to cloud-based workloads and how the industry is creating solutions to help customers take full advantage of this. Phil, I wonder if you could give some advice for the customers on how to take advantage of this industry movement.
Yeah, early on, I mentioned that disaster recovery as a service is growing at about 18% compound annual growth rate. The data protection as a service market as a whole, which includes backup and archive, is actually growing faster than that, about 19.1% compound annual growth rate. So what that means is organizations are moving to these solutions very rapidly. And we find that the reasons that they're doing so is because it can simplify the environment by using a qualified managed service provider or cloud service provider to be able to manage these solutions. What you wind up with is more data cycles or more labor cycles really for the IT organization, because it relieves them of the challenge and the responsibility of managing the infrastructure, of updating the software, of keeping everything up and running, and lets them focus on higher value projects within their organization. So it really is those third-party service providers that are making the big difference and are really driving the success of these kinds of solutions.
And Jeff, have you got some advice for the customers?
That's absolutely. When we, again, I'll refer back to the data protection trends report. When we ask customers where they're sending their data, you saw it on the earlier slide, resoundingly, they are looking to back their data up to the cloud and then to take advantage of service providers. And if we at Veeam were going to give one piece of advice about getting from where you are to where you want to go, it would be get help, because leadership knows they want to go in this direction, they do, but leadership is risk averse. They want someone to help them de-risk the process of moving to the cloud, moving their applications to the cloud, and moving their disaster recovery and data protection to the cloud as well. So getting help from a partner like Accenture, who has the broad view, who has the experience, who's done this for hundreds and thousands of customers, is really, really helpful if you're on the tech side and you want to get leadership buy-in to go forward with this. Knowing that you've got a partner like Accenture who can help with it can be really, really valuable to get where you want to go.
Well, that's just an awesome setup for you, Giovanni. Thanks, Jeff. Giovanni, would you like to close off with your advice from your perspective? But thanks for that, Jeff.
Yeah, I need to thanks to Jeff for the words that he said, but let me say, it's clear that I can say that Accenture is helping replatform entire industry on cloud by reimagining industry value chains in terms of what the cloud makes possible. And let me say, ASIC is born for this. We have to see ASIC is an instrument that customer can leverage to start their journey to cloud. Let me do a very quick example of how a customer used ASIC to enable on journey to cloud. In this case, We have provided a complete set of solutions supporting this journey. We have provided a way to have an easy picture. What are the components of the customer infrastructure? What are the costs that customer is facing with this particular infrastructure? How we can use this data to define a target scenarios using migrating to the cloud and using the better cloud solution to reduce the cost that customer is facing. We have provided the tool to support customer during this phase to discover and to analyze the infrastructure scenario. We have supported the cloud readiness. It's something that we have always mind, but typically we do manually. We can provide tool to support this analysis to understand. But to answer to the question, but my application is ready to be moved in cloud. And last but not least, considering the topics of this meeting, we cannot forget how to protect our data. In this case, we leveraging on modern data protection solution enable us to solve several customer challenges. In our case, we have provided with the solution, we have provided a way to protect the application, but not only, enable the moving the data on cloud. And not only, as I said before, we can leverage on the solution to enable disaster recovery scenarios. That is very important. In this way, we have provided several tools to support customers to be safe and manage the journey to the cloud in a better way.
Well, that's excellent advice, Giovanni, and thanks for that and sharing the examples of what you've been doing in the in your center in Rome. That concludes our panel discussion. So I'd like to thank Phil, Jeff, and Giovanni for obviously insightful comments, but also some excellent advice for customers on the call. Before I close, I just want to put up a couple of links on the screen that allow you to get to via a QR code to get to a bit more information if this has piqued your interest. Firstly, for the Accenture Cloud Innovation Center and Veeam use cases. So you've heard the theory, you've heard the intent. Check out where we a bit more detail on that. And the second one is the QR code that gets you to the Veeam Cloud Protection Trends report that Jeff has referred to several times during the call, which has got a really great depth of information on what we're seeing from a very large population of people that we ask questions to. So hopefully that gives you a chance to get a bit more information. And finally, to everyone that's dialed in and listening, appreciate you choosing to invest your time with us. Hope you found it useful. Take care and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, bye.